What I want to do this morning, take us back into the book of Isaiah. This is going to be a challenge for you as I preach through this book. I hope you have the interest in these kinds of things. And in order to teach the book of Isaiah, you've got to know ancient history. And so really it kind of provides a good platform to remind us of some events that took place in ancient history and see what God had to say about those events. The burden of Babylon is the way this prophecy starts. It begins in Isaiah chapter 13 and goes mostly through chapter 14, not all the way through. What do we mean? The burden of Babylon. Well, some translations now don't translate it burden. I saw where they translate an oracle of Babylon. Most of you I know have the King James or maybe the New King James. I didn't check that particularly. But the burden, the readers of the King James Version, when they're in the prophets and they read about the burden, they know they're fixing to read some bad news. This is God's pronouncement of His judgment upon someone, and it's not going to be good. I contrast that word burden of the old prophets with the word gospel in the New Testament. The gospel's good news. But in the Old Testament, the emphasis was, wait a minute now, this has gone wrong. And so the prophet is given the message to preach. And it must have been something the prophet really didn't want to preach. You know, it's a lot easier to get up and tell good news than bad news, and it's a burden. But Isaiah is going to deliver this burden about Babylon. Now, Babylon, you've heard of Babylon? It's one of those ancient kingdoms that was one of the fastest to rise into its glory and outshone those other ancient kingdoms of the past, but it was short-lived and had a very rapid downfall. Before that kingdom of Babylon, that was the Assyrians, a cruel people. And God used the Assyrians in judgment against northern Israel. Remember how Israel split in two under the dynasty of David and these other dynasties that didn't follow the Lord? And those 10 tribes had many times to repent and they didn't. God raised up the Assyrians. They took those 10 tribes to the north off into captivity. And they lost their identity as a people. That's what people mean when they talk about the lost tribes of Israel. Talking about those northern tribes carried away into Assyrian captivity. And then the Assyrians turned on Jerusalem. Came right up to the walls. But God intervened. And the Assyrians weren't able to take Jerusalem. They returned to their homeland. And it was right at the peak of their power. And they began a downfall. And then came Babylon. God used Babylon in judgment against Assyria. But then He also used Babylon in judgment against Jerusalem. The Babylonians came to Jerusalem and took the city and tore down the walls and destroyed their temple in which they had so much pride. Solomon's temple is leveled. And the city is depopulated with the walls destroyed. And they took the vessels of that temple back with them, back into Babylon. The king of Babylon was drinking wine from the vessels of the temple from Jerusalem in Babylon. That night, that handwriting was on the wall that told him, your days are numbered. And that night, that city fell to the Medes. And Isaiah is going to be talking about this in this prophecy. And it's just amazing because he's talking about Babylon when Babylon was the city far away. And they were not a prominent player on the world stage. The Assyrians were at the peak of their power. And here Isaiah talks about Babylon. It would be another 100 years before the Babylonians destroyed Nineveh of the Assyrians. It'd be 125 years before they would come in and destroy Jerusalem. It would be 170 or more, 75 years before Babylon fell and the children of Israel were able to return to their homeland. And Isaiah's already talking about this. Now those critics that don't believe in predictive prophecy, boy, they have a time with chapters 13 and 14 in Isaiah. How do they explain this? Look, it says very plainly, which Isaiah the son of Amoz did see. No question about who this Isaiah was and about when he lived, and yet he's talking about things 100 to 200 years that couldn't have even been on the radar of events when he is talking. And we see how these things come about. Well, it's just part of that evidence to show Isaiah, he saw these things, is given him by God. And so when we study these things, one, we're going to learn some old history, but second, we're going to learn confidence that we can have in that these holy men of old spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. But now the burden of Babylon, that judgment. Isaiah is very dramatic. This begins with a banner raised on a bare hill. I want you to imagine that. Out there in the hills, then there's this hill and it's barren. And then a banner is raised on that hill. And you know what that is? That's a call to get the armies together. And so the armies come gathering together up to this bare hill. The Lord is raising His army to bring His judgment on Babylon. Here it is. Lift ye up a banner upon a high mountain. Exalt the voice of them. Shake the hand, that they may go into the gates of the nobles. I have commanded my sanctified ones. I have also called my mighty ones. Now we know what that's going to be. That's going to be the Medes and the Persians coming together. I've called them together for mine anger. Even them that rejoice in my highness. The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, the tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the host of the battle. God's raised that banner. The kingdoms are gathered in this prophetic vision. They're going to bring God's judgment. They come from a far country, from the end of the heaven, even the Lord, and the weapons of His indignation to destroy the whole land. Howl ye, for the day of the Lord is at hand. When you read that expression in the Bible, the day of the Lord, now sometimes it's a reference to the final judgment that will occur at the end of time, but not always. The day of the Lord is always a day of judgment. And so the day of the Lord is at hand. He's talking about this day of judgment against Babylon. It shall come as a destruction from the Almighty. Therefore, here's what the people see. There's an army like that coming against us. How do they feel? Well, it scares them. All hands be faint. Every man's heart shall melt, and they shall be afraid. Pangs and sorrow shall take hold of them. They shall be in pain as a woman that travaileth, and they shall be amazed at one another, and their faces shall be as flamed. You're going to see this army and hear this army coming after them. It's going to scare them. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh cruel. Now some of this is going to be hard to read. It's going to be a cruel judgment that comes upon a cruel people. It says, both with wrath and fierce anger to lay the land desolate, and He shall destroy the sinners out of it. It's going to be a dark day. You know, in the beginning, when God created the heavens and the earth, there was darkness upon the face of the deep. So when God said, let there be light, there was light. And He set the sun and the moon and the stars to give light upon the earth. But this day is going to be a day of darkness and confusion. So Isaiah says, the stars of heaven and their constellations thereof shall not give their light. And the sun shall be as darkened in his going forth. And the moon shall not cause her light to shine. We talk about going through dark days, don't we? That's what Isaiah is talking about. It's going to be a dark day. And I will punish the world for their evil, and the wicked for their iniquity. And I will cause the arrogancy of the proud to cease, and I will lay low the haughtiness of the terrible. I'll make a man more precious than fine gold, and even a man than the golden wedge of Ophir. Therefore I will shake the heavens, and the earth shall be removed out of her place. When you're talking about the heavens and the earth, Isaiah often makes reference to the heavens and the earth. And he's talking about the order of things in the world. There's a certain order there with Babylon in place, but that order is going to be changed. I'm going to shake the heavens and move the earth out of its place. There's going to be a rearrangement of the powers and of the structure of the world when this occurs. In the wrath of the Lord of hosts, in the day of his fierce anger. And look this picture. It shall be as the chaste roe, and as a sheep that no man taketh up. You see deer, how they just flee and run, don't you? They're going to get out of there. And now these sheep just lost out there. No one's taking them up. No man's watching them. And so they're going to run, try to get to a place of safety. Every man shall turn to his own people and flee every one to his own land. But every one that is found shall be thrust through. And every one that is joined to them shall fall by the sword. And then their children also shall be dashed in pieces. That's cruel, isn't it? It's one of the Psalms. Talks about happy shall he be that dashed thy children against a stone. Well, it's the way they treated others, and they're going to get it themselves. Children dashed in pieces before their eyes. Their house shall be spoiled, and their wives ravished. Behold, I'll stir up the Medes. That's who this is. The Medes are the ones that take Babylon down. And Cyrus the Mede comes into place to rule Babylon after Belshazzar is removed out of his place. The Medes against them, and you're not going to buy them off. They will not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Their bows also shall dash the young men to pieces, and they shall have no pity on the fruit of the womb. Their eyes shall not spare children. And Babylon, the glory of kingdoms, the beauty of the Chaldees, excellency, shall be as when God overthrew Sodom and Gomorrah. What happened to those cities? We're not even sure where those cities were anymore. So complete was the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Look what happens now with Babylon. It'll never be inhabited. The archaeologists think they found where that old city was. And to this day, no one lives there. It's abandoned. Neither shall it dwell from generation to generation, neither shall the Arabian pitch his tent there, neither shall the shepherds make his fold there. And then it's going to be inhabited by wild beasts. The wild beast of the desert shall lie there, and their houses shall be full of doleful creatures. And owls shall dwell there, and stars shall dance there, and the wild beasts of the islands shall cry in their desolate houses, and dragons in their pleasant places. And her time is near to come, and her days shall not be prolonged. The city destroyed and abandoned. No one will live there, and the wild animals take up their residence in the houses that used to be that glorious city of Babylon. And then Isaiah 14. The Lord will have mercy on Jacob, and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. It's under the Medes that God tells Israel they can return to Jerusalem. And the strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and for handmaids. And look how it's swapped. The whole thing is switched over now. They shall take them captives whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. And it shall come to pass in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou hast made to serve. And then they're going to taunt Babylon. Take up a proverb against him. Here's what they're going to say about Babylon. But thou shalt take up this proverb against the king of Babylon. Now notice who we're talking about here. The king of Babylon. Don't forget this. They'll say, how has the oppressor ceased, and the golden city ceased? The Lord hath broken the staff of the wicked and the scepter of the rulers. He who smote the people in wrath with a continual stroke. He that ruleth the nations in anger is persecuted, and none hindereth. The whole earth is at rest. Oh, all the oppression that Babylon caused, they're out of the way, and the earth the inhabitants of the world can breathe a little now that Babylon's out of the way. The whole earth is at rest and quiet, and they break forth into singing. Yea, and then look at the forest. The fir trees rejoice at thee, and the cedars of Lebanon saying, since thou art laid down, no feller has come against us. The Babylon that ruled over this great vast land, they exploited the resources and cleared the forests for their own means. But now they're not cutting those trees down now. And the fir tree and the cedar tree, no, there's no loggers out there bringing those down. And then welcome to hell. You think about hell as a place of torment, and that may not be far removed from this. It's really talking about the place of the dead. Babylonian king, welcome to hell. Hell from beneath is moved for thee to meet thee at thy coming. It stirreth up the dead for thee, even all the chief ones of the earth. It has raised up from their thrones and the king of nations, and they shall speak unto thee. Now they're talking to the king of Babylon, coming into hell now. All these kings of the earth that have gone before, and now there comes the king of Babylon. Here's what they say. Hast thou also become weak as we? Art thou become like unto us? Thy pomp is brought down to the grave, and the noise of thy viols, the worm is spread under thee, and the worms cover thee. Sounds horrific, doesn't it? Now look what happens next. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? You ever heard the devil referred to as Lucifer? Well, that's why they do it, because of the King James Version here. So, how art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer? Is he talking about the devil? This is a proverb against the king of Babylon. People have taken this, and you can see how they read maybe the devil into this, but that's taking this out of context. Lucifer here is not the devil. The word Lucifer means the bright, shining star. That's what the king of Babylon was. He's the bright, shining star, but no more. He's been brought down to hell. Watch what he says. How art thou fallen, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will set upon the mountain of the congregation in the sides of the north. I'll ascend above the heights of the clouds. I'll be like the Most High. Yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit. Now, this isn't the origin of Satan thinking he would be as great as God. This is the pride of the haughty heart of the king of Babylon. He thought he was so great and he was so good, nothing will happen to me. You remember that night when he saw the writing on the wall and his knees smote one against the other? And now he's brought down. And they that see him shall narrowly look upon thee and consider, saying, is this the man that made the earth to tremble? That did shake the kingdoms? That made the world as a wilderness and destroyed the cities thereof, that opened not the house of the prisons? And then it says, all the kings of the nations, Elam, all of them lie in glory, every one in his own house. That has to do with their tombs. They're buried with royalty. The kings are buried with pomp and splendor and royalty. But this king, he's not going to be buried. That's a great disgrace not to lie unburied, especially if you'd been a king and no one even buries you. Thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch, and the remnant of those that are slain, thrust through with the sword, that go down to the stones of the pit, is a carcass trodden underfoot. Thou shalt not be joined with them in burial, because thou hast destroyed thy land and slain thy people. The seeds of Eber's doers shall never be renowned. And then prepare slaughter for his children. They've taken out the king, now take out his children. Well, why destroy his children? Let none rise up of that dynasty. Let there be no one else to ever claim to that king that they can claim to be king. He's going to wipe them all out. So no one of that dynasty will be on that throne. Prepare slaughter for his children, for the iniquity of their fathers, that they do not rise or possess the land, nor fill up the face of the world with cities. For I will rise up with them, saith the Lord of hosts, and cut off from Babylon the name, and the remnant, and the son, and the nephew, saith the Lord. I'll also make it a possession for the bittern. That's a kind of a bird. And pools of water. And then this, I will sweep it with the besom of destruction, saith the Lord of hosts. Now, you may not use that word besom much. It's an old Saxon word. It has to do with a broom. And some of the translations will say a broom of destruction. So you're going to sweep it with a broom, okay? The word besom has to do with that little old homemade broom. You may have seen them. You get a stick and you tie all these twigs and sticks around it like the corn broom, you know, and it's kind of in a circle. And you might think of the broom that the witches ride. This is kind of broom associated with witches sometime. That old witch's broom, that's a besom. You're going to take that little old homemade broom and just going to sweep the land clean with the broom, the besom of destruction, saith the Lord of hosts. The Lord of hosts has sworn, saying, as surely as I thought it, so shall it come to pass. Now this is an assurance. This is what's going to happen. It's going to happen just like I said. And as I have purposed, so shall it stand. That I will break the Assyrian in my land upon my mountains and tread him underfoot. Then shall his yoke depart from off them and his burden depart from off their shoulders. Look, I'm going to do it. A sign that I'm going to destroy Babylon. You're going to see it when I destroy Assyria. Let that be an assurance to you. If I can take out Assyria, I can take out Babylon. This is the purpose that is purposed upon the whole earth, and this is the hand that is stretched out upon the nations. For the Lord of hosts hath purposed, and who shall disannul it? And his hand is stretched out, who shall turn it back? How'd you like to be that preacher? How'd you like to be Isaiah? And that's your sermon. The burden of Babylon. I want to go back and show you something. The beginning of Isaiah 14 and verse 1, there's the tantalizing possibility that this might be messianic. It's a kind of language that Isaiah had already used in talking about not just God's purpose for Jerusalem, but in His ultimate purpose for Jerusalem and of the whole world. He says, I'll have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel. Well, the Lord's church is the New Testament Israel. Could that be what He's talking about? He says, I'll set them in their own land, and strangers shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. Strangers. Well, that'd be the Gentiles coming in with them. Is that what he's referring to here? The people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and for handmaids, and they shall take them captives who captives they were, and shall rule over their oppressors. That kind of language is used in other places, and talking about how we're captured by the gospel and brought into God's church as servants unto Him and His people. Could that be what he's talking about? The language is used in Isaiah 2 through 4, where it says all nations, about Jerusalem, all nations will flow into it. Many people shall go and say, come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, and He'll judge among the nations. And so Isaiah had already used language like this. You can't say for sure, but it sounds like it could be messianic. But then look at this. It shall come to pass, Isaiah 14:3, in the day that the Lord shall give thee rest from thy sorrow and from thy fear and from the hard bondage wherein thou hast been made to serve. There's a rest for us. It's a greater rest than any material rest than they could have had. It's a spiritual rest. Remember Sunday night when I was talking about the Lord's invitation? Here it is. Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Well, this is why Isaiah is so difficult. It's hard to see sometimes into just what he's saying. Now, is this applying to them then, or does this have ultimate meaning for us later? And I'm not going to be dogmatic there. As it comes up, I'll go through it and I'll offer those suggestions. But so much of Isaiah is messianic that it makes you think. And even if we miss this part one way or the other, we don't miss what the New Testament says, do we? Now, from all the burdens of sin and all the triumph of Satan, Christ has defeated him and provided for us a way of rescue and a way of rest. And we need to come to Him. Let's learn from the history of the ancient nations and of how God dealt with people then. He was dealing with them with the ultimate purpose of bringing this to us. And learn, at least, if no other way by analogy, how God's going to deal with us. Let's come to Him. Let Him take us captive. Let us be servants in His household. And we'll enjoy that rest. Don't you want to be a member of the Lord's church? You know you do. You need to be baptized into Christ and enter into those blessed promises. And the invitation then is extended as we sing this song.